What is a good teacher? Most of us can look back to individual teachers who made lasting impacts on our lives. For me, Mr. Dietz, my 7th grade science teacher, was one of those amazing individuals. He was a good teacher not just because of what he taught, but because he knew how to awaken curiosity and shape understanding. He ultimately instilled in me a confidence and a desire to pursue knowledge. In classical education, we care deeply about the right curriculum and the great books, but it is the teachers who enable true formation well beyond the simple mere transfer of information. Join us for this episode as we explore the best practices of good teachers. Most of those practices also make for better ways to engage one another in our homes.
Mountains. We all face them as we seek to influence the next generation. Get equipped to conquer the challenges, summit the peak, and shape exceptionally thoughtful, compassionate, and flourishing human beings. We call it Ancient Future Education for raising the next generation. Welcome to BaseCamp Live. Now your host, Davies Owens.
Well, welcome to another episode of BaseCamp Live. Davies Owens, your host here with you. A big Merry Christmas to you if you're listening as this episode is dropping. Of course, the fact that most BaseCamp Live episodes are evergreen, meaning you can listen to them whenever. I suspect some of you are listening years from now on a beach somewhere. Either way, we're grateful that you're listening at this moment. If you do have some time over the break, always remember you can go to basecamplive.com, search up there in the search bar, and there's many topics and many different guests that may interest you if you have some extra time to listen. As we head into the 2026 year, I am excited. I'm going to be on the road quite a bit, speaking at different schools to parents and school leaders. I look forward to being on many of your campuses. As we are out this year, we continue as well to evolve the ZipCast platform that I know is being used by many of your schools. So excited to be partnering with you, both schools and organizations. And in the midst of all of that, I'm always grateful to connect with you. So send me your questions and your thoughts, info@basecamplive.com. Our guest today, Carrie Eben, has spent more than 25 years championing classical education in both private schools and the homeschool setting. She is a founding board member at Sager Classical Academy in Siloam Springs, Arkansas, and she serves as a head mentor for the Searcy Institute's Master Teacher Apprenticeship in the Ozark Mountain region. Carrie also consults with schools and teachers and parents, building customized workshops and mentorships that help classical education take root in real life. She's also the co-author, along with Dr. Chris Perrin, of The Good Teacher, 10 Pedagogical Principles that Will Transform Your Teacher, which we're talking about on this episode. As always, before we jump in, I want to say a special thank you to those who are partnering with us to support this episode, in particular, our friends at Wilson Hill Academy, as well as Life Architects Coaching, the Champion Group, our friends at the Herzog Foundation, Wise Phone, and of course, our own ZipCast family. Thank you all for your support. You can read more about their great resources on our partners page. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Carrie Eben. Carrie Eben, welcome to BaseCamp Live.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a joy to have you on. I am so excited about this conversation. You and I have been doing this classical Christian thing for a couple decades now, but I'd love for folks to hear specifically, how did you get into classical Christian? I assume you didn't grow up in this world.
Yes, I totally didn't grow up in this world, and I'll give you the shorter version here. But,
sure.
So I've been in classical education for 25 years, but, it hasn't been this linear path in the same kind of role, for 25 years. But I've been a classical teacher when it was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, when it was first, I felt like the movement was brand new there. It was the first classical school, I believe, in Tulsa, and, kind of stumbled upon classical education. I'd been at a Christian school before that, teaching 5th grade, and I found this school and they invited me to apply. And, I kind of showed them my portfolio and they said, you're the kind of teacher we want. You do a lot of hands-on and embodied education. I did a lot of dressing up and, medieval feasting and, kind of role play with history. And so I felt like I was kind of a quote, classical teacher. I hate to even use that word. I felt like I was a fairly good teacher, before then. I had a child not too long after I started that job, and I was very convinced that I was going to have my own children participate in this kind of education. It was the kind of education I had always wanted. So I got my degree in curriculum and instruction. I got an undergraduate degree in education at John Brown, and then I went on to get my master's degree in curriculum. But I did some of my master's degree research in classical education. No one knew what that was 25 years ago. So that was kind of fun.
Well, 25 years ago, I mean, you literally were Gen 1. I mean, nobody really knew what it was 25 years ago. Yeah.
And honestly, I knew nothing. I mean, like, so I say 25 years, but come on. I mean, I really feel like I've learned so much really in the last 5 to 10 years. So my son, I was a classical parent then, and then I was a classical teacher at another school in Dallas, and then I decided to homeschool my children. And I feel like that was one of the best experiences and one of the best educations I could have had as a classical educator, because I taught everything kind of in real time from beginning to end. And I learned and taught logic, formal logic. I learned and taught Latin. I read the classics with my kids. I taught writing. I had there was a very rigorous program in grammar, English grammar. And, I thought I knew English grammar before that. And, so I just had a blast, and I educated parents. And of course, just kind of like anything I do, I don't do anything halfway. I kind of jump in, kind of a crazy woman that way, where I just jump in with my whole heart and then, figure it out as I'm going.
When you really had to, I mean, in those early days, again, it was truly pioneering. And so something like, how do you teach classically, or what's a classical teacher, I don't know of anything out there. And even today, that's still, we talk about it often on the podcast, that classical does a pretty good job about pointing to what books we should read and the great books in our curriculum. But this whole idea of how do you actually teach it is still a huge need, and a big question mark for a lot of folks who didn't have that experience. So really, where do classical teachers come from your experience?
Where do they come from?
Yeah, I mean,
honestly, I think the best teachers like that. So we started a classical school here in Siloam Springs, Arkansas, where I'm located now, and a lot of the teachers that we found, early on had been homeschool moms, because there's kind of something about that's kind of organic about their teaching, and them understanding everything that they're doing and learning alongside their children. It felt very natural to classical education. So that's kind of how those are my go-tos. I kind of lean on classical homeschool, or not even classical, homeschool moms, just homeschool moms.
It's such an interesting observation. And, so often parents rightly will say, well, where do your teachers come from in the classical school? And as you and I both know, as one who's hired many teachers over the years, I mean, if they show up with their application, they got their master's from XYZ in education, honestly, I'm like, well, okay, sorry, you're not going to work, because you've literally been indoctrinated into a teaching methodology that's counter to everything that I'm trying to teach you. So you kind of have to make teachers. Is that your sense as well?
Yes, absolutely. In my experience, sometimes it's harder to reteach a teacher who has been from a traditional education background, unless they are of the type that they're searching. I also find the ones who are from a traditional education background, and they know it doesn't work. It's not working, and they want something different. And so they come to a classical school like the one I helped found, and they're like, please show me something different. And then they kind of jump in with both feet and try to figure it out. So
because it's really on the job training, and that's your point. And it seems like even now, and I with some frequency I'm at schools and do some teacher training, and I often will say, really, when you go help somebody try to figure out how to teach classically, most folks just point like to Gregory's 7 laws. And then it's like, well, what is that? How does that really work? And so this idea of, pedagogy, which is a very fancy word, is really, I'll let you define it, because it's part of the title of the book that you and Dr. Chris Perrin said there is a need to help people figure out the art of teaching classically. So The Good Teacher, subtitle 10 Pedagogical Principles That Will Transform Your Teaching. you saw this need, obviously, that, boy, people love classical Christian, but how do you teach? And so define pedagogical and help folks. Why is that a word that we need to be aware of?
Well, pedagogical, I believe it has something to do with, children.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, now I'm thinking, now you put me on the spot. I'm like,
I think it's the
pediatrician,
right.
PED.
It's the ped. Yeah. We can hack our way through the Latin prefix. Yeah. No, but the point is, it has to do, go ahead. It has to do with, how
do you train up,
children?
how do you train up a
Mm-hmm.
child? And
right.
So, I would say that, pedagogy is really, it's how do you cultivate, in a child. I'm thinking of the word educare.
Mm-hmm.
How do you lead out a child,
right.
and kind of what are the practices, what are the best practices in
right.
order to do that. And that's how I see pedagogy.
No, it's helpful because I think, the core problem we want to just align around, because I think a lot of times parents in particular, look at classical Christian schools and assume teaching in and of itself it's just generic. Everybody teaches. It's just, what are you teaching? But your whole point is, boy, you got that. You're misunderstanding the heart and soul of the classroom is actually the way that one teaches. The pedagogy is so in general, just for people that are listening, most of us were trained in classrooms that were not taught by classical teachers, and they were kind of modern. So what would be some elements of kind of modern teaching, like sit and get and jam and cram and all those things that we grew up with? Is that a kind of a way to describe most progressive modern teaching in contrast to classical?
Well, it's interesting because, 25 or over 25 years ago, when I was teaching at a private Christian school, I had a lot of freedom to implement the things that I wanted to. I really, the good and the bad was that I wasn't really, no one was really watching me in those early years of teaching. But the good news is no one was really watching me in those early years of teaching. And so I really was the curriculum. The teacher mm-hmm. was, I was the curriculum. I feel like today, I was just talking to a friend of mine whose husband is he's an elementary school teacher in a public school, and I think in second grade. And it's testing, assessing all the time. And it's really treating children like scientific, data points. So,
right.
And the teachers, from what I understand now, in a lot of public schools, is that they really don't have any freedom in the curriculum. Mm-hmm. They aren't the curriculum. There is a curriculum laid out before them. They have to follow it and have their students kind of, track and make these, check right. these different boxes. And honestly, I've seen that too with some classical schools. And, mm-hmm. It's like, whoa. We don't, we want the teacher to be the curriculum. And, sometimes I think we have lost trust in mm-hmm. our teachers as being the leader, the lead learner, and, being kind of the authority in that venture of leading students. And so that's why I think it's really important to discuss these principles and the good right. teacher. What is, it was on purpose. We didn't, call it the classical teacher.
Right.
What are just some universal things that help teachers be good humans and help other humans be good? Because that's really the aim and the goal of classical education as we know it today.
Yeah. And you think about often at open houses and other places, you hear when people are talking about the differentiation between a traditional progressive modern school and a classical school, is that this idea of we're more about formation than information. And that sounds great.
Yes.
But it begs this big question of, well, how do you form versus inform? And you were just saying people certainly can understand in most government schools, it's very much, they're coming down the conveyor belt. You stamp here's the 5 factoids they need, shove them in, test them, get paid for good assessment scores. And this idea of formation doesn't even really exist, although there is a whole formation that's very much happening, although
absolutely,
that's a whole other conversation for another day. But the point is that how do you train a teacher to form the things that are true, good, and beautiful, and that are lovely in students. So that's really what you're after. The good teacher is one who knows how to form, not just inform, it sounds like.
Yes. And the good teacher is on that road, herself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about, the PhD program that I'm in. Shout out to Faulkner University. And I started the program. I really have no big goals to become a tenured teacher, tenured professor in humanities at a college. That is really not my goal. I signed up for the program because I wanted to experience the great books and to know to be formed. I wanted to be formed by the great books. And I will tell you that in the last 5 years during my time in this program, I have grown so much. So, part of becoming a good teacher is taking that time to grow yourself, taking time to learn and to be invested. It's not about just doing your job at in the grammar school or in an upper school situation. It is about what are you becoming? What am I doing? And even my husband talks about he's grown through me, just through my education in the last 5 years, and then just even in my knowledge of classical Christian education. The things that I share with him, he's been formed by those and has been inspired to learn and read and kind of to dive deep of, what is it about the humanities and the great books and in this big conversation as a whole that makes us better people.
That's right. Well, that whole idea of, the student will be like the teacher. I mean, really, it's a mentoring. You're apprenticing under your mentor. I mean, historically, that's what it always was. And so you never want the teacher to be, well, I've got the 10 facts down. Let me give them to you. I mean, you want somebody who's an active lover and learner, and that's really at the heart of what you're doing. Well, let's take a break and come back because I'd love to get into we won't get through all 10 of the principles, but I'd love to get through a couple of them because they're so key to helping teachers and even parents understand really the art of teaching at its core. And so let's take a break. We'll be right back and continue the conversation. During this short break, I have a special invitation to all school leaders, administrators, and teachers. I want you to imagine for a moment stepping away from your everyday routine at school and diving deep into the rich foundations of Christian education, surrounded by world-class scholars, seasoned classroom teachers, and administrative experts with years of experience running schools with a lot of wisdom to share. That's exactly what the Herzog Foundation's Institute is offering. I've had the joy of serving as a training coach for the last few years, leading their 2.5-day training on spiritual formation and another one on parent engagement. They offer close to 50 unique training events ranging from board governance to marketing to classroom best practices. They even offer a training on how to teach the great books. And the best part of all, well, thanks to the generosity of the Herzog Foundation, these training events, including lodging, are completely free for Christian educators. Institutes are located around the country in beautiful locations, including at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., and the Reagan Library in Santa Barbara. Don't miss this incredible opportunity. Check out the details at theherzogfoundation.com. If you're seeking an education that helps your child thrive academically and spiritually, Wilson Hill Academy has spent years developing a model that I want you to know about. In their free guide, you'll see how their thoughtfully sequenced curriculum prepares students for college and how a biblical worldview helps them understand the world around them with clarity, and how their discussion-based classes teach them to think critically, not just what to think. You'll also discover how their teachers equip students to live purposefully for Christ. With accredited live online classes, your child can learn from master teachers anywhere with an internet connection, all within a community that has transformed families like yours. Download their free guide today at wilsonhillacademy.com/guide or in the link in our show notes. Carrie, wish we had time to go through all 10 principles, but for those listening that are teachers, or even parents, just you as you looked at this need of communicating well what it means to teach the good teacher, what are a couple of just core principles that you believe are places we should get started?
Well, the first two that are in the book are festina lente, which is a fancy way to say making hay slowly. It's highlighting a paradox, making hay slowly, which is the principle of, mastering each step rather than rushing through content. The quickest way forward really is to just be careful along the way. You think about, the hare and the tortoise, which we mentioned in the book. Everybody knows that fable. And then much, not many, which are multum non multa, which is much, not many. So really going deep with a little than trying to cover a ton. And, and in today's society, and so these, and I want to say really quickly too, these are principles. These are not techniques, principles, Principia, first thing. These are things that have been true forever, universally. The Roman army, I hate to bring up a military tactic thing, but the Roman army was successful because they made hay slowly. They did things in a succession. They did it well. They were careful. They mastered each step along the way. We think about, mastering anything like music, any kind of skill takes time. So it's a paradox and a tension, but it's important. So that's the cool thing about, all the things that we talk about in the book. They're principles. And so they actually can encompass anything. So make hay slowly and much, not many are not just for teachers. They're for dads, and they're for moms at home, and they're for business owners, and they're for students. They're for everybody. These principles transcend everything. So, and especially in today's society.
Oh, totally.
So
let's unpack a little bit. I mean, it's a fascinating phrase. It seems contradictory. Making haste, which seems like go fast slowly. It's kind of what it, I mean, how do you,
what is this?
What? You double speak. What are you talking about? Like, so what does that mean? Give me an example of like a, make haste quickly, which is the modern classroom, I guess. What does that look like as opposed to, and I know the second one really gets into like the volume of books and things, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but make haste slowly. What does that look like when it's not done well and when it is done well?
So in today's modern classroom, and I'll even include many classical classrooms, there are so many things, happening. And this is where, so make haste slowly and much, not many are like two sides of the same coin. So they, it's even hard to distinguish because, when you have too many things happening that you're supposed to be doing, it's hard to make haste slowly. You can't, the teacher can't slow down and actually have time to address the things that are important in the progression of skills. The students can't master them. And so what we have today, especially in modern classrooms, just our modern society in general, we rush through things because we feel so pressed for time. We feel pressed for time. And so we don't make haste slowly, and we don't, what happens in a classroom often is, I did this myself, you're like, okay, come on, let's hurry up, get those facts done quickly because we have to go to music now. Hurry up and learn, hurry up and learn. Right. And just learning doesn't happen like that. Nature takes its time. Something I learned from John Amos Comenius. He was a great a pedagogue or teacher from the 17th century. He basically says, nature makes no leaps, but proceeds step by step. You can't hurry what can't be hurried. Think about the development of every child. And really, teaching is all about, wherever the child is where they are. And you can't help them grow up any faster than they were meant to. And we deal with so many, students in a classroom, a teacher does, and even our own children, we cannot rush that process. It's kind of like let nature take its course.
So what it looks like practically, I would think in the modern classroom where it's, again, sit and get, here's your 20 random history facts, your spelling words, you can kind of get the idea of like, you could jam those in maybe faster, but you can't create wonder and curiosity and conversation with speed. I mean, by design, you really have to kind of savor and reflect and converse. I mean, is that what you're talking about? You really just slow it down so we can actually have time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's where, the first two principles, make haste slowly and much not many, they set up a rhythm for success for all the other principles, because you don't have time. If you're not making haste slowly, you don't have time to wonder and be curious. You don't have time to have Scully or contemplate at rest anything. Or you don't make time for repetition or embodied learning. So the first two principles really set up the success. And I've talked to heads of school about this, because really that comes from top down. What is your purpose of education? It comes back to the virtue, the aim of being good, and the aim being virtue. And if it's about all the programs and all the bells and whistles that we associate with school, then I think people get into,
Right.
Teachers and schools get into trouble because they're just trying to do too much. And we really have to kind of prune back what we're doing.
And I'm curious your thoughts on this, because you and I have been at this classical thing for about 2.5 decades each. And we often reference the idea of sort of the first early generations of classical schools, were the kind of Gen 1 schools were, if you ask them what they were trying to accomplish, a lot of it was about rigor for rigor's sake. And I remember, I still have somewhere a screenshot of a school's website, kind of mid-late 90s, I guess, but it was probably a fourth grade little girl standing next to this stack of great books. I mean, all the bindings of the books, and it was very impressive. They were as tall as she was, but if you look closely, her eyes were kind of bloodshot, and you're thinking, really, does she need to read all of those books to be classically trained? And we're good Americans. We love speed, we love volume, and so I won't name the school, but a friend who runs a pretty sizable school most of us have heard of. When he first got there, the story goes, he took the teaching team, principals and curriculum writers, and they went off on a multi-day retreat and came back, and they pretty much gutted, if you will, maybe as much as a third of the curriculum. Do we need to read 18 books in 10th grade? Could we maybe read 12 and go deeper and have, again, that's kind of what I'm hearing is like, let's just stop with go 100 miles an hour thing and try to go deep, which is so contrary to my kids won't be ready for college if we don't go fast, so it's a very countercultural approach.
Right. So to make haste slowly, you really have to focus on the next principle, which is much, not many. You need to prune. Mm-hmm. And, the symbol for this principle in the book is pruning shears. And it is about, less is more. Less is more. But we don't you're right. We don't like that in our society more. We have supersized everything. And, people believe that more is more. And we do that with our schools, but that doesn't make sense because we can't, there is a feast out there. And, if you look at classical education as a feast, you can only take in and digest as, a certain amount at a time, otherwise you're
just working against yourself. And now you're burning people out. You're boiling them in their mother's milk, or whatever the analogy you want to say. It seems like I'm a big fan of Charlotte Mason, the educator, who, she talks about that. Let's be, rather than being an inch deep and a mile wide, be, a mile deep and an inch wide. I mean, it's just slow down, go deep. And that is obviously has huge ramifications for parents, thinking about other choices you're making about how you program your child's day. Do you need 5 team sports every afternoon? And all of the insanity basically fueled out of FOMO. We're afraid we're going to do something wrong or leave our kids behind. But, the richest gift is what you're describing, which is teaching in a classroom where depth and substance is more important than anything.
So I had the opportunity to go to Ambleside in the UK. In the UK with where Charlotte Mason, you've brought up Charlotte Mason. So I got to go to Cumbria and where she had her school. And I actually got to hold in my hands her actual lesson plans in my bare hands, her lesson plans for her grammar. And also hold in my hands some of the student, the teachers as some of her teachers that were her students, their nature journals. It was incredible. And I had a dream, and I told a bunch of heads of school at a retreat recently that I had a dream right before we were going to Ambleside, that I had woken up kind of in a panic. And the words that were kind of stamped in front of me were, I do everything. I love nothing.
Wow.
I know. That was like, I woke up and I told my friend, God just spoke to me. And to me, that is much, not many. I needed to pay attention. Something was happening that I needed to slow down in my own life. Because let me just tell you, Davies, make haste slowly and much, not many do not come naturally for me at all. I'm a fast mover, and I jump in and I want to do all the things. And so I'm preaching to myself, but that dream really kind of woke me up, and I kind of spent the time in the UK contemplating that. And, as I was holding Charlotte Mason's lesson plans, and how she really did draw students in to much rather than many, less, not more. And the reason why we need that is because we just, if we're doing too much, we don't love anything. Right. And we need to draw our students' affections to things that are lovely. And if they don't have the time to spend with it, to know it well, they won't love it. They will end up hating it. And I think part of the problem in even just a lot of classical Christian schools right now is, there is this sense that they want to keep up, with all the things that a public school does and have all the bells and whistles and offerings. And they also want to be academically better than everybody else. And just like you said with the you're telling about the pile of books, we are comparing ourselves, and that is not what education is. That is not what education is. Forming the soul and aligning loves to what is good, true, and beautiful.
Wow, that's very well said. Let's take another break. We'll come back. I want to kind of here at the last part of our conversation, just really get some more ideas that you have put together, both for those who are teachers. And again, so much of this is how we're to live our lives at home and conversations. And again, as parents, we teach too. We may not have the formal title, but that is a really natural part of what should be happening in the home, just how we have conversations and how we create the depth over just the scattershot. So let's take a break. We'll come back and continue our conversation. Today's episode of BaseCamp Live is brought to you by my friend Chris Casper, who you heard on a recent episode. His invention, the Wise Phone, is a much-needed third way, providing a solution from the dangers of a smartphone on the one hand and the limited capacities of an old-school flip phone on the other. His simple, distraction-free phone design for families who want technology to serve their real lives and give us and our older children a way to do basic essentials like calling or texting or maps without the web browser and the social media and the endless apps that can pull them and us into the addictive time-wasting aspects of a smartphone. I personally have a Wise Phone, and I can vouch that it is an excellent solution and an appropriate way to use technology that supports virtue and focus and healthy habits. Check out the link in our show notes and on our BaseCamp Live website partners page, where Chris is offering BaseCamp Live listeners a discount. School leaders, if you've ever wondered how to make school fundraising truly effective while being meaningful and mission-driven, check out Advance. It's an event being run by our good friends at the Champion Group. The Advance Gathering is April 8th through the 10th, 2026 in Greensboro, North Carolina. And here's the best part. It is completely free to attend. You just have to cover travel and lodging. Advances for heads of schools and boards and development directors, leaders who feel the pressure to raise big dollars without losing sight of their calling. At Advance, you're going to find tools and training and encouragement while connecting with peers from around the country. You're going to learn from top development experts and leave with real-world strategies that you can put into practice right away. Plus, every attendee receives a complimentary development evaluation and review. Spots are limited. It's a great opportunity. Don't wait. Register today. Check out the links in the show notes for more information, as well as on our BaseCamp Live Partners page. Carrie, the art of teaching is, for most teachers, it comes down to, what do I have to do to be successful? I mean, that's what everybody asks of themselves. And success often in schools equals you got through this body of material and your students performed decently well on some kind of a test. So if that's the end, talk about, as I know you explore in the book, the importance of understanding assessment well, because you don't want to teach to the test if that's not the goal.
Right. I love speaking about assessment, probably because I wasn't the best test taker when I was a student. So, I'm going to stick it to them. But I think if we are assessing well, we are keeping the assessment aligned with the purpose of education and the nature of the student and the nature of teaching. And modern assessment generally doesn't do that. I mean, you're assessed with, one moment, maybe a standardized test, which some students do well with, some don't. You're not necessarily seeing what they know. You're expecting them to know exactly what you want them to know, which there's nothing, of course, the teacher, is directing what's important, but maybe they are not able to articulate it in the way that the test is showing. So that's one reason why I love narrative assessment. Some schools have gone to narrative assessment, at least pre-K through sixth grade, or maybe even eighth grade. To me, I kind of think there's no reason why a school could not do narrative assessment, at least for grammar school or up to eighth grade. High school, there's always a, we got to put a grade on a transcript. But I will tell you, from my homeschool mom experience, our transcripts, it was a whole different thing. I didn't give my children tests, but I knew, like, in that same way, I mean, maybe a Saxon math test or maybe a science test, but mostly I was sitting beside them, assessing them in every moment. So assessment, if you look at the word ossidere, which is Latin, it means to sit beside. And that's really what assessment is, coming alongside, having a relationship with a student and knowing where they are and helping them get to the next place. And, our classrooms are bigger, it's not very efficient to do that in a classroom. So, I don't have all the answers there, but I do think it's very important for teachers and schools, administration, to look at how they're assessing students, and because that's really how our teaching ends up aligning there. And assessment should line up with our purpose of education. And if our purpose of education is towards virtue, then that's what it should reveal. So
it is hard when larger classroom environments, but you think back to the old Oxford model. It was a tutor sitting there having a conversation, and you can tell pretty quickly if the student understands the concept. And it's also, many schools now are asking, well, what do we do about AI? It's like, that's the way around it. You actually have a conversation, or you give them a prompt and watch them write. You don't have to send them off to go assess something, external. So it's complicated from a time standpoint, but it is the way to do it well. I love you pointing that out.
Yeah, I think there's so many other ways to do assessment well. Especially, I did a talk at Great Hearts last year about AI and assessment and virtue. And basically the point I was trying to make is if education is for virtue, that's what you're going toward.
Yeah.
And there are so many other ways, like narration, oral assessments, having students participate in debates, mock trials. I love doing those types of things. They're fun. They're fun.
They are. And
who knew assessment could be fun, but it can be.
You need a T-shirt that says that assessment can be fun. Well, this is great. So in the last few minutes, we've covered a lot of ground. Your book is got so much more in it. I know that's a great resource. If you're just take a moment, and what words of encouragement would you give to teachers who are listening?
Well, the good teacher is really about empowering teachers, a lot of teachers, to keep doing what they're already doing. Many teachers who are good may not think, oh, I'm a good classical teacher, or they may not know if they're a good teacher or not. And they may need the encouragement, I think, that comes from this book that kind of validates some of the things that maybe they're already doing, and puts language to that, and maybe helps them, grow some of those principles, and, to intentionally do them. So I would say that, these principles are nothing new. I would say many good teachers are already doing these principles. So I hope that encourages those teachers. For teachers who are frustrated, in classrooms, I hope it gives them something to have conversations about, with administration and with other teachers, and say, hey, we need to maybe rethink some of these things. The good teacher does not have all the answers, but it hopefully will make a good conversation between teachers. I really think it speaks to the teacher. There's a lot of real life examples and discussion questions and things in the book. I think it's a good resource for teachers.
I know it is. And it's something that teachers want to have, to your point earlier. I mean, they're always on the path of learning. And so this is an opportunity to have that conversation for administration, to ask the same question. Are there things that we maybe need to recalibrate so that we can continue to deliver excellence? Well, Carrie, thanks so much for your time. There's a lot more we can talk about on this topic, but I appreciate your insights, and then look forward to having you back at some point to continue our conversation. Thank you again.
Thank you for listening to this episode of BaseCamp Live. Be sure to check out our website, basecamplive.com, for more than 8 years of timeless episodes that you'll find helpful and encouraging, as well as the helpful resources offered on our partners page. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of our partners like the Herzog Foundation. See you back next week.